Hi, welcome to Courageous Journeys. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Today I want to do a video to follow up a little bit on my live that I did on Finding Neverland. I realized afterwards that there was something really important that I wanted to talk about and just forgot. I missed it on my list, but it's something that's really important, and really I think it makes sense that it becomes its own video. Because this is a really serious thing and it affects a lot of people. And that is the myth, really, that if you are abused, if you are sexually abused, that you will go on to sexually abuse others. And this is something that I've seen be more of a concern or an issue for male survivors. And that's true as survivors ourselves, that male survivors tend to worry about that more than female survivors do. That's obviously a very general statement, but just from my experience and what I've heard both male and female survivors talk about, it seems to be something that is on men's mind in terms of that idea being there than it is on women's. Now, I'm not saying, let me clarify, I am not saying that men tend to think about abusing people more than women do. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying that men will come in and share that, oh my God, does it mean that because I was abused, I'm going to eventually abuse somebody else? Not that they have a desire, not that the thought has ever crossed their mind to do it, but this fear, because this myth exists out there that if you are sexually abused, that's the cause of people sexually abusing people. So I want to talk about that. First of all, just plain and simple, being sexually abused does not make you an abuser. That's it. Pure and simple. Being abused does not make you an abuser. Now, I know that in terms of interpersonal violence, like domestic violence and like physical abuse, that there is a lot of kind of evidence out there that children who grow up in domestic violence homes, the male children are more likely to be abusers, the female children are more likely to be victims, that kind of thing. That is very different than sexual abuse, because sexual abuse, what drives somebody to sexually abuse a child is different than what drives somebody to act out in the heat of a moment with anger directed towards other people and not knowing how to manage that. Doesn't excuse it, but those are different things. So the idea has been around that if you are sexually abused, then you learn to sexually abuse other people. And that just is not true. Now, on a video I did recently, I talked about, for children, if you are sexually abused, you might act out what you're learning or experiencing with another child, maybe a little younger, maybe a lot younger, but that's a different thing because you're still a child. So whether you're male or female, being sexually abused does not lead to you abusing children. And this is important for survivors to understand, but also incredibly important for society to understand. So again, I'm doing this video because if you saw Leaving Neverland, it was in the second part, I believe, after Wade Robson had disclosed to his family that he had been abused. And I don't remember his wife's name right now, but they were talking to his wife And his wife said, I think it was very soon after she learned, his wife asked him if he ever had any inappropriate thoughts towards their son. And I believe that Wade might have mentioned that as well, and like just kind of conversationally almost. And when I heard her say that she had asked him that, like one of the first things that she asked him, it broke my heart. And even now, it really broke my heart. Because to be a survivor and live with all of that pain and everything that creates, and then to have the person that you love ask you if you've ever thought about abusing your own child. That's not happened to me, so I can't say exactly what that would feel like. But I can just imagine the depth of sadness and shame that potentially could have been brought forward in that very moment. And how, particularly if there is no conversation, no further conversation, how that person could be left with then the fear of, are other people going to think I'm abusing my son? Am I going to abuse my son? And have I just been blocking out something or whatever? And part of the reason I say that, while I haven't personally experienced that, I've known clients who have. I have had a female client that feared. She shared that she had feared that eventually that's what she would choose to do as well, even though she had no desire, never at all. But she assumed that that's where she would go. And I also had a male client. I've had a couple of different male clients that have bought into this myth and feared that either they would end up doing it, or nobody would ever want to marry them because they'd be afraid that they were going to do it, or wouldn't want their kids around them. But in particular, I had a male client years ago who had gone to therapy previously and didn't go very long because in the very first session, his therapist, who was supposed to be helping him heal, his therapist, when he disclosed that he had been abused, asked him if he had ever abused another person, a child. I was shocked. I was angry for him. I was sad because here is this man who had lived with the regular pain and shame that survivors experience. He decided to go get help. And his therapist, I'm sure not intentionally, but his therapist in that very first session caused so much more shame and fear for him. If a therapist is asking you just based on the fact that you've been abused, whether you've abused somebody else, it's horrible. That is absolutely horrible. And that's why it's important to talk about this. Being sexually abused does not make you an abuser. Is it true that there are sexual abusers, perpetrators, who have been abused? Yes, absolutely. However, it is also true that the majority of people who have been abused do not abuse other people. So let me say that again. While it is true that some people who sexually perpetrate on children, while it is true that they may have a history of sexual abuse, what is also true is that by far the majority of people who have been sexually abused do not go on to sexually abuse children. One does not equal the other. Not at all. And to connect cause and effect there is dangerous on different levels. It's dangerous to survivors because they live with that shame that isn't even based on how they actually feel or what they desire or how they live their life or anything else. And that's dangerous because with that depth of shame and that depth of fear, people do not live the lives that they deserve to live. They may even end up taking their own life. The man that I was just referring to, who was a client of mine, he had decided, and I don't remember exactly how old was when he came to me, but I believe maybe in his 40s, but he had decided long ago that he was never going to have children because he was afraid that he would end up doing the same thing. So it is a danger to survivors, male and female. It is also a danger to our communities and our society because it creates this idea that we need to be afraid of anybody who's been sexually abused, but not afraid of those other people. And that is not the case at all. There are more, at least statistically speaking, there are more girls who are abused than boys. Yet, the majority of perpetrators are male. So again, if being sexually abused cause and effect, causes you to abuse, then there would be more female perpetrators. And there are female perpetrators without a doubt, but there would be more female perpetrators than male perpetrators, and that is not the case. And in this danger that it does to society in creating this black and white idea, it also keeps us from having bigger conversations, from working on trying to change the circumstances, the dynamics of what it is that may create or be the actual cause for somebody to sexually abuse children. I believe that I've also had a female client who said that she didn't want to have children because she was afraid that she would end up abusing that child or her children as well. And I think, again, going back to the idea that this seems to be something that kind of impacts men a little bit more than women, and probably because we know that the majority of perpetrators are male, not female. So males automatically take on that idea, that fear, that they're more likely to be a sexual perpetrator. And that is just not the case. So if that's something that you have struggled with, if you're not a survivor and you happen across this video, please know, try to understand what it really means to be a survivor. And that fear, that myth that is out there, will no longer be there. So again, being sexually abused does not make you a sexual perpetrator. It does not make you a pedophile. It does not make you a rapist in your adult life, raping adult people. It does not. Is there a correlation? Can you look at people in prison for sexual abuse who have a history of sexual abuse and say there's a correlation there? For them, yes. But correlation does not equal cause. There are a lot of people in prison who have tattoos. Does that mean that having a tattoo makes you more likely to be a criminal? There's just a lot of different examples that you could look to that you can identify a correlation that these two things might happen to be true, but it doesn't mean that this thing makes this thing happen. So there's a difference there. And that example that I just gave about tattoos, I think is not something I thought about right before I said that. But you could kind of do the same thing. And really, it used to be that people did assume that people with tattoos were somehow criminals or bad people, right? Not all that long ago, really. But tattoos have no bearing on who a person is, whether they're more inclined to break the law. Doesn't mean that at all. So I just want to make sure that I addressed that piece, because anybody who watched that, you know, if you're married to somebody who was abused and you had never thought, the thought never crossed your mind that your partner might abuse your children, but then you heard that and thought, oh my God, do I need to be afraid of that? No, just because your partner was abused does not mean that you need to be afraid of that. Thank you for listening. I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a beautiful rest of your day.